All right, gotta say, diving into some seriously heavy stuff with this deep dive today.
Yeah, no kidding.
You sent in this article, Archetypes of the Antichrist, and wow,
Intense. Right.
it really is. And we're talking about exploring the concept of the Antichrist, but through the lens of, well, Adolf Hitler.
And that's what makes this one so fascinating right off the bat.
Yeah.
This article isn't saying Hitler was the Antichrist.
Right.
It used him as a case study for this whole idea of what an Antichrist figure really represents, you know?
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. What's the article's take on the whole Antichrist thing then?
Basically, it's saying that the traditional view of the Antichrist, like some evil dude with horns and a pitchfork,
Right.
is maybe a little too simplistic.
Okay.
Instead, it's saying the real danger of an Antichrist is all about this idea of like misplaced devotion.
Misplaced devotion. What does that even mean?
Okay, so it's not just about someone being outwardly evil.
Yep.
It's about them taking the place of God in people's hearts, you know?
Okay.
It's about that shift where a leader is suddenly more than just a leader.
Right.
They become an object of worship.
Okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with this, and I'm not going to lie, it's a little creepy to think about.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when the article uses Hitler as a prime example.
Right, and it's not shying away from the horrors of his regime or anything.
Right.
But here's where it gets even more complicated. The article points out that Hitler's regime actually did achieve some positive things. Rebuilt the German economy, restored a sense of national pride, that sort of thing. And it argues that those accomplishments, even though they came at a horrific cost, those achievements played a part in his rise to power.
So it's like those achievements, even if they were twisted or whatever, gave his whole ideology this dangerous sense of legitimacy.
Exactly.
People could point to those things and be like, see, he's actually doing good, you know?
Yeah,
And then they just overlook the warning signs.
Yeah, and that's a core argument right there. That an Antichrist might not even be intentionally malicious. You know what I mean?
Right.
They might actually believe they're doing good, which makes them even more seductive, even more dangerous.
Yeah, that is a really terrifying thought when you really think about it.
It is.
Because it's so easy to get swept up in the charisma of somebody who seems to have all the answers, right?
For sure.
Especially during times of like fear and uncertainty, when people are just looking for something to cling to.
Exactly. And speaking of fear, the article makes a point about how Hitler used people's anxieties
Right.
and their prejudices to his advantage.
Oh, absolutely.
He tapped into existing anti-Semitism in Germany
Right.
and painted Jewish people as this threat to the entire nation,
Right.
and then justified his persecution of them as this necessary evil.
And that's where this whole discussion gets really, really uncomfortable, doesn't it?
Totally.
Because it forces us to confront the reality that even seemingly good intentions can be twisted to such genuinely terrible ends.
Absolutely.
And it makes you wonder, you know, what would it take for us to be seduced by that kind of thinking?
It's a scary thought, isn't it?
It is.
And it speaks to just how powerful fear and propaganda can be. When people are afraid, they're more likely to cling to anyone who promises them some sense of safety and security,
Right.
even if that person's methods are morally questionable.
Which brings us to, I think, a really crucial point here.
Yeah.
The article doesn't just kind of throw this heavy stuff at us without, like, offering something else, right?
Right.
It actually makes us stop and consider the author's perspective on all of this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is a whole other layer of complexity here.
Oh, for sure. And it's really fascinating because while the author clearly condemns the atrocities committed by the Nazis, there are these hints of, I don't want to say sympathy,
Right.
but maybe a certain understanding of how some people were drawn to certain aspects of Nazi ideology.
Okay, now that is a really slippery slope.
It is.
How does the article even begin to unpack that? I mean, how do you separate analyzing the appeal of certain ideas from the absolutely horrific actions that those ideas were used to justify?
That's where this article gets really interesting. It seems to be encouraging a more nuanced approach to history,
Okay.
one that acknowledges just how complex human motivation really is. It's not about, condoning evil or anything like that. It's about trying to understand the forces that allow it to take root and spread.
That's a lot to process, even for a deep dive like this. So where do we even go from here? It's like we're supposed to be thinking about the absolute horror of what happened during the Nazi era, but then also trying to explore how an antichrist could come to power without being, like, straight up evil.
And that's what makes this article such a perfect example for the deep dive,
Yeah.
It's easy to just call Nazi Germany evil, end of story.
Right.
But this article wants us to go deeper. It's asking why, not just what.
It does make you wonder if we do that too much, you know?
What do you mean?
Like, see things as black and white, good versus evil, and we don't even try to understand anything else.
Oh, totally. That's actually something the article talks about, kind of.
Really?
Because when we do that, when we oversimplify, we're actually more likely to be tricked,
Yeah, because it's easier to believe someone who makes things simple.
Exactly.
Even if the answer comes with a horrible price.
Right.
Okay, so then what does the article say we should do? How do we avoid all that? Especially with something as, I don't know, as important as religion.
Well, it seems to say that we have to watch out for idolization.
Okay.
And not just with, religious figures, but anybody.
Politicians, celebrities.
Yeah, all of them. Social movements even.
Wow.
Anytime we put someone or something up on a pedestal like that, we're in trouble.
Because then we just stop thinking, don't we?
Exactly.
We don't ask questions, and we let these people get away with anything.
You got it. And you can see how that happened in Nazi Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Hitler made himself into this, savior figure, the embodiment of Germany.
Right.
And the more power he got, the less people questioned him, even as he got worse and worse.
And it's even more disturbing. The article says it wasn't just the average person.
It wasn't.
Even people in the church, important people, they were drawn to him too.
That's what makes this whole Antichrist thing so interesting,
It does.
It reminds us that even the groups that are supposed to be good, they can fall for this stuff too.
It's a scary thought.
It is.
But important.
Definitely.
It's almost like the article's saying good and evil isn't out there.
Right.
It's inside each of us. It's about the choices we make.
100%.
Yep.
And that's why we always come back to critical thinking.
Right. Yeah.
This article, it wants us to question everything, our own beliefs and everyone else's.
Because if even really devout people can be fooled by these ideologies,
Right.
then none of us are safe.
It's a scary thought, but it's the truth.
So we've talked about good and evil, about putting too much faith in leaders, about thinking critically, especially with something like religion. But how does the article tie it all together?
It does something really cool, actually.
Yeah.
It says we should try to step back from the Holocaust
Yeah.
and look at how Hitler rose to power without all the emotion.
How is that even possible? How can you separate that?
The article says it's not easy, no.
Right.
But it says we have to, if we want to understand how something like this could happen. And it uses the idea of Hitler as an antichrist to show us that.
So we're looking for patterns then.
Yes.
Warning signs.
Exactly. The article doesn't really care about Hitler as a person. It's more about what he represents, you see.
Right.
Like the power of a leader who's really good at speaking, the danger of nationalism, how fear and prejudice can be used to control whole groups of people.
It's almost like it's saying, hey, this is how easy it is for people to be tricked, even if they start with good intentions.
Right. And that's the scary part. That's what makes it so powerful, I think. It's not just about the past. It's about seeing those patterns now, today.
So what do we do with that? It feels kind of overwhelming when you put it like that.
I get it. It's a lot.
Uh-huh.
But the article, it does have some things we can actually use,
Like what?
Like the big one is to really pay attention to who we give our devotion to, where our trust is.
So back to that misplaced devotion idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the article saying we need to be a little skeptical.
Okay.
Especially when someone acts like they have all the answers to these really complicated problems.
Because those are the ones who will use our fears against us, right?
Exactly. And it goes for anybody,
Yeah.
Politicians, religious leaders, even like those big influencers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The important thing is to be critical, to ask questions.
Yeah.
To not just blindly follow anyone.
It's about remembering that nobody's perfect, no matter how good they seem.
Exactly. And that takes work, We have to do our research, challenge what we believe, and then actually stand up for it, even if it's not popular.
This whole conversation, it keeps coming back to personal responsibility, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
It's like the saying, fighting against this antichrist idea, it starts with each of us. Powerful stuff, right? And that's what the deep dive is all about, getting you to think for yourselves, to really engage with the world, and to never stop questioning.
Complacency, man. That's how these bad ideas take root.
100%. And in a world with so much information all the time, it's even more important to be careful, to think critically, to stand up for what you believe in.
So we're wrapping up this deep dive on the Antichrist.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the most important thing is that we all have a part to play in stopping tyranny, you know?
Okay.
It starts by being aware of this misplaced devotion, this blind faith in these big
All
personalities.
right.
But we also have to be brave, to speak up against what's wrong, and to never give up on making the world a better place.
I like that. Strong words to end on. So, to everyone listening, keep asking the tough questions. Don't settle for easy answers, and never underestimate how much power you have. Until next time, keep diving deep.